projection of our will, and I think it's a message to friends and adversaries alike that this is a completely different ballgame that we're in now. Be happy to take questions, but I'm probably going to not get into a lot of details. Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, how much of this $20 billion is for, first of all, for the military, and how much involves cleanup and current operations, as you say, such as aircraft, and how much involves preparing the military to strike back? Can you give us any sense of how much involves preparing for strike back?
I don't think we know the breakdown yet, partly because the needs are so enormous. It basically includes all of the above, and not, as I said, not just for the Defense Department. There is help for the victims and their families. I mean, even things as simple as DoD mortuary teams that have gone up to New York to help with the disaster up there. You've seen the disaster in this building, and we still have major work to do. But obviously a significant piece of this is going to be to bring our armed forces to the highest level of preparedness to be able to execute whatever it is the President may ask them to do.
How much of the $20 billion would be for the armed forces?
That remains to be worked out.
Well, it has not been.
Secretary Wolfowitz, it kind of rolls off the tongue pretty well, sustained and broad against terrorism, but doing it, most people concede, is a totally different issue. According to the polls, the American public supports military action against those who conducted the attack on Tuesday. But what do you hit, and how do you go after it? If it is Osama bin Laden or somebody comparable, there don't seem to be any hard targets, nothing comparable to the damage done here. What kind of a war do you wage?
Well, I think we're going to see how this unfolds, and it's going to unfold over time. I think one thing is clear is that you don't do it with just a single military strike, no matter how dramatic. You don't do it with just military forces alone. You do it with the full resources of the U.S. government. It will be a campaign, not a single action. And we're going to keep after these people and the people who support them until this stops. And it has to be treated that way. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, what support will you be getting from the allies in this effort? NATO has expressed support. Are you talking with your Russian counterparts? Will we see a different alliance
I think the
striking
whole
at terrorism?
civilized world has been shocked by what's happened, and even some elements of the uncivilized world have begun to wonder whether maybe they're on the wrong side here. The President's been in close contact with a number of world leaders, including our allies, including President Putin of Russia, including our friends in the Middle East, in the Gulf region. I think everyone understands that we have unfortunately entered a new era. We're all going to be tested. We're going to be coming to each one of them, I'm sure, with a variety of different requests. Some of those are being developed. Many more we're going to develop as we proceed. And I think so far we've seen indications from a wide variety of sources that people will step up when asked. And believe me, they will be asked. Yes.
And does this mean there's an end to any kind of drawdown of the military?
I'm not sure which drawdown you were referring to. We were talking in the context of the QDR about major investments to build up our military for the next decade. I think what this means is there are also going to be some huge requirements to build up our military for the next year and maybe longer. Yes?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, you have a quadrennial defense review that's due to Congress in just a few weeks, and certainly this changes the whole perspective of it. It changes everything from the program that you're going to put your money in. Do you still intend on meeting that September 30th deadline, or what do you plan on doing with the quadrennial defense review?
I don't think a final decision's been made on that. I wouldn't agree that it changes everything. It changes a great deal, and as I just said in answer to the previous question, we now have requirements that we didn't contemplate 2 weeks ago, but I don't think that means that the requirements that we contemplated for 10 and 15 years from now are necessarily all that different. Yes.
Sir, question about the budget process as it stood on Monday before the incidents. Have you or anyone else at OSD level issued different guidance, different directions today or yesterday as to the disposition of the development of the next comm cycle and budget as a result of the tragedy? And can you give us any visibility about where you stand in building that next fiscal perspective for the military buildup that you've discussed? Have you put that down in writing to the forces?
Well, as I think you probably understand, because it's a well-informed question, that the budget process is a great big machine, and you don't sort of turn it on or off or steer it quickly. And I think that machine continues to work in a lot of fine-grained detail on our out-year requirements. Clearly, there are going to be a whole range of new requirements, and we are already working with the services and defense agencies to start to identify a range of what those near-term requirements may be. As you probably realize, this $20 billion is 01 money, and so it doesn't even begin to address the question of amended requirements for 02 and beyond. We are in a different era. I think the President has made that clear. The Secretary of Defense has made it clear. Everything is going to change, but we hope that with this $20 billion initial move forward, that our enemies will get a message, and the people who have to be with us will get a message as well that we're serious.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
The President has said that the United States intends to find those who were responsible for these attacks and hold them accountable. But he and others, including you today, have also spoken about a much broader campaign that would seem to go beyond, in terms of targets, beyond those that may have been responsible for this particular attack. How should we look at that?
Well, I think the President's words are pretty good, so let me say, these people try to hide, but they won't be able to hide forever. They think their harbors are safe, but they won't be safe forever. I think one has to say it's not just simply a matter of capturing people and holding them accountable, but removing the sanctuaries, removing the support systems, ending states who sponsor terrorism, and that's why it has to be a broad and sustained campaign. It's not going to stop if a few criminals are taken care of. Yes.
Do you anticipate, I mean, given the devastation in New York, I mean, $20 billion looks like it's just going to be a down payment on repairing what was destroyed. Do you anticipate having to shift around any of DoD's internal resources in the 2002 budget to cover some of the bill here and to begin work on any of the kind of anti-terrorism or counterterrorism?
I anticipate, and the indications from the Congress are that my anticipation is well-founded, that we will have new additional resources to cover not only the damage that has been inflicted, but to start to begin to build the military capability we need for other options. So I don't envisage shifting resources around, as your question implies.
So the money that you all have asked for now would stay where it is, and then you expect to get additional resources in the 2002 budget for added work restoration.
That's my
here.
expectation, yes. Over here.
Secretary Mineta talked today about his request to put military personnel aboard civilian airliners when they start flying again and to supplement the Sky Marshal program. Have you received that request from the Transportation Department, and do you think that's one you're going to be able to take on now?
I'm not sure what Secretary Mineta said. The question of marshals is a complicated one. The question of putting U.S. military personnel who may or may not be trained in law enforcement techniques on planes is a difficult one. We're obviously going to work with the Transportation Department and with the FBI and the Marshal Service and anyone who can use our expertise to provide what capabilities are needed. But it is a complicated issue. Yes, indeed.
Just to follow on that question, if I could, Secretary Mineta also said that he was going to request personnel from Delta Force to come in and train air marshals in a speedy fashion to get them up and running quickly. I'm assuming, I guess, that you have not received such a request. Are you willing to entertain such a request? Is this something that would be appropriate for the Defense Department?
There's definitely been discussion, and I don't know whether you want to get into a semantic discussion about what's a request, what's not a request. What is needed, and I think we all agree on it, is a plan for training up civilian air marshals, and if U.S. military expertise is useful in that, obviously we want to make it available. At the same time, this is fundamentally a civil function. It doesn't require all the exotic training that Delta Force members have, and on the other hand, it requires law enforcement training that our people don't have. So we're going to be working closely. I hope you understand. I mean, there's a great deal that we're improvising here as we go. We're trying to improvise as fast as we possibly can.
Looking at that may or may not be deemed appropriate. There may be some other avenue that would be more desirable.
I think the exact way forward hasn't been decided yet. Yes, and back.
As a follow-up, you said some of the money will be to start to build the military capability we need.
we've been identifying terrorism as a threat now for 10 years. What is it that you envision when you say that? What is the capability that we don't have? All right,
this is Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz giving a sobering analysis of what is likely to come in the weeks, months, and even years ahead. He's talking about a broad strategy within the United States government that would involve not only military but other means to take on what he considers the enemies of terrorism. We'll be back with more, but first we are going to take you now to a tape of President Bush taken not long. Here is President Bush coming out of the George Washington Hospital Center earlier this afternoon.
People who worked for our government that was inside the building, met with their families. This is a great hospital. The doctors and nurses are not only accomplished, they're loving people. There's a wonderful spirit up on the floor that we went to. We told them that country's praying for each and every one there. We're praying for their families. Some of the folks could talk, and they described the horror of the incident in the moment. They talked about escaping, going through fire, and crawling through debris. That it's clear that they were fighting for their survival then, and like every patient up there, they're still fighting for their survival. And it's just a sobering moment for Laura and me, but we're, again, thank the hospital, the docs, the nurses, and of course, again, tell the families that the nation prays for those who have been injured during this unbelievable act of terror. Thank you all.
President and Mrs. Bush traveled to the Washington Hospital Center earlier today, where they visited with 11 of the victims of Tuesday's bombing here in Washington. We are told that 9 of the 11 were in critical condition, 1 in serious condition, 1 in fair condition, and that the president was conveyed into the rooms of each of these patients by a family member, did a brief visit, and then came down and, after thanking doctors and nurses, had a conversation with reporters. Also, as we saw just before that tape, Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz was talking to reporters, and it's probably worth reiterating a couple of the key points he was making. He was talking about assembling an international coalition to deal with the problem of terror. He said, he made no bones about it. He said that we will have to remove states that support terrorism. He talked not only about military means, but also financial and other means, presumably meaning economic and other force. He said that we need to send a message to the world, quote, that we're serious. And finally, as I mentioned before, the phrase he used was ending states that sponsor terrorism. Now, the Deputy Secretary of Defense no doubt understands that that not only requires an enormous expenditure on the part of the United States, but also people on the receiving end of that kind of force are going to try to send a message of their own. This is a very sobering press conference. The reason for the press conference was merely to talk about an expected $20 billion so-called emergency supplemental appropriation. It's $20 billion extra dollars that Congress is granting to the Pentagon, not only for military purposes, but also for helping clean up the mess after Tuesday's tragedy. But you can rest assured that the Department of Defense is going to be back with more and very significant requests for new expenditures and even new ways of thinking about military doctrine. Let me toss it now back to David Asman in New York. David?
Tony Snow, thank you very much. Sobering is the right way to describe that press conference as the Defense Department gears up what undoubtedly will be a battle coming in days or weeks ahead. Some of the information, some of the evidence gathered as to where to strike and who might be responsible for this is being actually uncovered right now as we speak in Lower Manhattan. Some of the search efforts have uncovered extraordinary finds that our own Eric Shawn has been reporting on this morning, including possibly pieces of the plane or one or both of the planes that smashed into the Twin Towers, and possibly even bodies that may have been on that plane. And in addition, there's a little bit of good news to report about what's going on down there. Eric Shawn joins us once again live from Lower Manhattan. Eric?
Yeah, David, let's first start with some terrific news, if it's the case. We're hearing unconfirmed reports that 2 survivors have been found in the rubble. 2 survivors, not a lot, but at least these would be 2 more survivors if this is indeed the case. This has not been confirmed officially. We're waiting to get that word from official channels later on this afternoon. But we're hearing here that 2 people have been pulled from the rubble. If that is indeed the case, it would provide a tremendous boost to these rescuers who are working so hard and haven't had a break by finding anybody since yesterday when they recovered 5 bodies. Now, the recovery system is working on 2 tracks. One is the search and rescue with the dogs, with the TV cameras going down the holes and the voids, finding people, trying to see if they can get any survivors. The other is the evidence, and there's been some movement on that. Law enforcement sources tell us, not confirmed, but sources tell us that the body of a man believed to be one of the terrorists was found in the Cockpit ruins. That is because we're told he was dressed not in pilot's clothes, was not in a uniform of a commercial pilot, but some other clothes, so it could be a body of one of the terrorists. Also, some chilling news, a body of a flight attendant also, I'm told, has apparently been recovered. The flight attendant's hands were bound in the back by a wire. That would then, of course, seem to indicate that the hijackers bound by wire the flight attendants with their hands behind their backs, which could provide one reason why they were not able or did not put up a fight and were basically relegated to one part of the plane. In terms of other news and evidence, we are told that there is evidence gathered from the plane that if the search and rescue folks who are doing this find pieces of the aircraft that they think is the aircraft, that is segregated to a separate pile that is marked airplane wreckage, and that is brought into a separate truck, obviously for very important reasons, because that could provide crucial evidence. One of the major points of that is the evidence that has to do with the so-called black boxes that are actually orange. The rescue workers here being told that that is priority number 1 besides the search and rescue, but for the evidence to try and get those black boxes that are actually orange that could provide such clues and unravel some of the mystery of exactly what happened in the final moments of the crash. Those boxes record about a half an hour of an airplane flight previous to when the 2 planes hit the World Trade Center, so they could get up to half an hour of the flight on that. Meanwhile, there's also a call from many of the volunteers who are here for this. This is a sophisticated mask that goes over or a mouth like this. This is designed to weed out all the particles. There's a tremendous amount of particulate matter in the air. We're told that the asbestos levels are 4 times than accepted in the center of the ground zero. So many professional fire units, search and rescue, hazmat, they have these, but the iron workers, the laborers, the guys who are in there in torches, the workers and the union guys who are taking out stuff by hand, a lot of them have just these flimsy little coverings that you can go, we bought ourselves actually in a drugstore, and many police officers only have these. Not enough experts tell us to try and completely ward out potential small particulate matter such as asbestos that can be so troubling. So if anyone, I have a call from some of the volunteer guys, some of those groups, if anyone who is watching us today around the country has any access to these type of more sophisticated breathing apparatus, and you know who you are, if you have them, please get in touch, we're told, with Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's office and try to see if there can be any type of donations of this equipment for the excuse me, for the thousands who do not have them. As you can, as this indicates, the cloud, the plume of smoke that has been drifting over this whole area is really enveloping the lower Manhattan. This is why this is so important. You've got this plume that has come up from some more
Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Attorney General John Ashcroft is speaking. Let's go there right away.
Emergency rescue personnel struggled to make their way in to those structures. Many, and we don't know how many yet, never made it out of the buildings. Even as we continue to hold out hope that more of these brave Americans will be found alive, it is my duty as Attorney General to begin to process the provision of relief to the families of public safety officers who sacrificed so that others might survive the attacks of September the 11th. The Public Safety Officers Benefits Act of 1976 provides for approximately $150,000 in benefits to the families of law enforcement officers, firemen, emergency response squad members, ambulance crew members who are killed in the line of duty. This morning, the President of the United States, President George W. Bush, directed me immediately to implement procedures to streamline application processes and approval processes of claims for benefits under this act. Pursuant to the President's directive, the Department of Justice this morning has taken the following actions to expedite the delivery of benefits to public safety officers' families. First, the existing regulations under the Public Safety Officers Benefits Act requires that officers' families and employing agencies fill out individual forms certifying that the officer was killed in the line of duty and that no disqualifying circumstances were present, and that the officer was in fact related to the family members seeking the benefits. These regulations direct the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the Justice Department to give substantial weight to evidence presented by federal, state, and local agencies and to resolve in favor of payment any reasonable doubt concerning the circumstances of the officer's permanent disability or death. In view of the unprecedented loss of life and the debilitating injuries to public safety officers, I have directed, pursuant to the President's request, that this process be streamlined in this case. I am directing the Office of Justice Programs to exercise the full scope of its direction and its discretion under the statute and regulations to accept applications, consider evidence justifying claims, and to process prompt payment of benefits. In cases in which benefits are sought by survivors of officers killed in the line of duty on September 11, I am directing that blanket certifications from executives of public safety agencies be considered as evidence of eligibility without requiring further individualized documentation. In addition, the family claim form will be abbreviated and streamlined. Secondly, the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs is immediately making available additional resources to see that the claims of fallen officers' families are processed as quickly as possible. Staff are being brought to New York from a variety of other settings to assist in case processing. Second, a separate computer database is being established to expedite and monitor the case processing. Third, lawyers from the Office of Justice Programs are immediately reviewing all cases from New York to make sure that those cases move as quickly as possible. Office of Justice Programs, fourth, staff members are being sent to New York to assist with family contacts and the assembly of claim packages, including the gathering of pertinent records. The Office of Justice Program representatives will be available on site, if requested, to pre-certify claim packages in terms of the completeness of those packages. These representatives will also work with the Treasury Department to expedite the payments to families once claims are approved. The provision of benefits is an insufficient but a necessary response on behalf of the American people to the unknown number of individuals who fought fires, law enforcement officers, and medical rescue personnel who died answering the call of their fellow citizens on September the 11th. It is President Bush's and my hope that the actions that we have taken today will provide a measure of relief to the husbands and wives and children that have been left behind. I know that it is the nation's hope that this assistance will stand as a gesture of the inexpressible gratitude that so many Americans feel, as well as a small tribute to the honor of the sacrifice of those who were willing to lose their lives so that others might be saved. Additionally, today I announced with the Treasury Department a step that has been taken to provide additional security at airports across the country. As airports reopen and as travel is resumed, There will be substantially increased security presence on the ground at designated security checkpoints throughout the country. The Departments of Justice and Treasury have deployed hundreds of U.S. Marshals, individuals from the U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Border Patrol, and U.S. Customs officials as part of a broad effort by federal law enforcement authorities to provide a larger police presence at airports in addition to the heightened security procedures already put into effect. We will take all precautions necessary to protect American travelers. Finally, our nation calls on us in times like this to be at our best. If we are to prevail in difficult times like this, we must be at our best. Since Tuesday, the Justice Department has received reports of violence and threats of violence against Arab Americans and other Americans of Middle Eastern and South Asian descent. We must not descend to the level of those who perpetrated Tuesday's violence by targeting individuals based on race, religion, or national origin. Such reports of violence and threats are in direct opposition to the very principles and laws for which the United States of America stands, and such reports of violence and threats of violence will not be tolerated. I now have a few updates with regard to the ongoing investigation. Legal attachés of the FBI around the world are receiving enormous cooperation from law enforcement authorities in the host countries that are cooperating with us to assist us in following up on leads. We have also received numerous offers of help from other countries if we need those elements of assistance, and we are grateful for the assistance that has been offered and the assistance that has been rendered. With regard to federal law enforcement personnel casualties, there is an FBI agent assigned to the New York field office who remains missing. 3 U.S. Marshals who are assigned to the Southern District of New York sustained minor injuries. We are also in the process of collecting information nationwide regarding the loss of life and casualties among law enforcement personnel. As of this morning, the FBI's Leads hotline has received 2,055 phone calls. Some of these leads have been helpful to the investigation. The website, which was opened virtually immediately after the crisis, has received more than 22,700 suggested tips. The FBI is working thousands and thousands of leads. As of this moment, none of the black boxes has been recovered yet. However, we believe retrieval of the black box at the Somerset County location is the most feasible in the short term. Last but not least, the total number of hijackers, to our best estimate and our best knowledge given the information at this time, on the 4 planes that crashed was at least 18, unless contradicted by evidence which we wouldn't anticipate. 2 planes had 5 hijackers and 2 other planes had 4 hijackers each. The director of the FBI, Mr. Mueller, is here with me, and we would be pleased to respond to your questions.
All the hijackers, were they ticketed passengers? And if not, do you know how they got on the planes?
Yes, they were ticketed passengers.
General Ashcroft, are you convinced, based on the evidence in Florida and Boston and elsewhere, that one of them was or may have been behind this?
I'm not prepared to identify or to comment on persons ultimately responsible at this time.
How many people at this point are detained around the country, and why are these potential accomplices, Mr. Director, of such concern to the Bureau?
Well, I can't give you a specific number. What has happened, as I indicated yesterday, that we're As a result of following up leads, we're interviewing a number of people. And in the course of doing those interviews, we find that a number of the individuals, when asked for identification and the like, are out of status. And when we find somebody out of status, we quite obviously bring in the INS and they are detained. And that is the policy and procedures we're following.
And they're a concern to you regarding the investigation?
Some may be concerned to us and some may not after we interview them.
What sort of indication do you have of other operations being aborted?